Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Decision Door Method. Welcome everyone. As folks are, whoopsie. Um, Welcome everyone. Welcome. So as we are getting started, please jump in the chat and let us know your name, where you're joining us from, and what is the toughest decision you or a client ever had to make. So your name, where you're from on the globe, and the toughest decision you or a client ever had to make. So go ahead and put that in the chat as we're getting started. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Sarah. She's saying your videos help her pass the MFT exam. Woo! Awesome. Divorce. I'm seeing that as the toughest one. We got folks from Lubbock, Las Vegas, Colorado. Forgiving. Oh, I like that one as a difficult. Quitting a job. Client getting divorced. Whether or not to marry my fiance. And they didn't end up doing it. Las Vegas. Staying or leaving a partner. When to leave an abusive relationship. Carla saying she passed her licensing exam. Congratulations. Got sent it from Ghana. Toughest decision was coming out. Divorce, retirement, changing career paths. Rachel from Australia, still thinking about the difficult decision. Okay. Wow, this is coming in so fast, so I'm just picking what I can read. Deciding whether or not to activate power of attorney for a child, immigrating to another country, life change, a client finding hope to live. We got Carrie from Canada, career change, whether to stay in a marriage. Awesome. Infidelity, deciding to come out. I got Jaslyn, second year MFT at CSUN. Awesome. Welcome. Selling my house and relocating. Wow. Okay. Managing abusive relationship. Sending my child with autism to a residential school. Decisions about where to live. About my grad program. Awesome. So leaving the military. Wow. Okay. We got some good examples of tough decisions here. So I am so excited to have all of you here today. This is the third and last of these Decision Door Method workshops. And I would say of all of the workshops I have ever taught, I have gotten so many positive success stories in the last week of people using this method immediately following the workshop. So I think you're going to leave today with a really practical set of tools, or at least, I don't say it's a set of tools. It's an intervention that's got lots of layers to it. And so, yeah, it's been really fun. It's been really exciting to read how people have been using the decision door intervention, both personally and with their clients over the past week. And so I'm so excited you're here, and I think you're going to really leave with something really practical and meaningful. And I think that's what's so what I love about this method. So this decision door method is something that kind of evolved from my clinical work and my training when helping clients make really tough decisions. Because when you think about it, you can go through grad school and take a licensing exam with 20 different theories, but we don't get a lot of like concrete techniques or interventions or guidelines of any kind for helping clients make really tough decisions like divorce or, whether to move, whether to go back to school, right? I mean, we do have ethical mandates around staying in relationships that we don't advise clients. We know that it's unethical to give advice as to whether to stay or leave. We know that much. But most of what we get is to help people then just reflect on their feelings, right, around something, and not a lot of a real practical strategy for these very difficult life decisions. And I would say that we're living at a time in history where we have more of these difficult decisions than ever before. And so I think you're going to find this particularly relevant with clients today. And around the globe, we have folks from around the globe here. People are facing just unfathomable, difficult decisions on multiple levels. And so I think you're going to find this particularly useful with your clients today. So let's go ahead and get started. So today, the first thing we're going to do is talk about these 21st century realities, which I think create many more dilemmas and many more unknowns than in previous times in history. Okay, I was alive in the last century. My kids like to tease me, did you have a dinosaur for a pet, mom? So, when the other day my son was like, "You were alive when the Berlin Wall came down?" I'm like, "Not only was I alive, I was old enough to be living in Europe and went to go see it." Um, so so we really do have different realities these days, and there's a lot more. I think we're faced with many more difficult decisions than we did several years in the past. And so we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the theoretical foundations for the decision door method. Then we're going to talk about the intervention itself. It's a very straightforward intervention. I don't think I've created a more clear, straightforward, take it out of the box and use it intervention in my entire career. So this is a totally new world for me, which is why it's been so fun. I've been using it in my Therapy That Works Unifying Framework kind of masterclass for the last couple of years. And everyone's like, you've got to put this, into a workshop. So I finally did. I'm so excited about this because I've been using it. But I've already gotten so many success stories coming in. So it's really been fun and kind of a new area for me to develop. We're going to go through some sample applications, what this sort of looks like. And at the end, I will issue you an invitation if you're interested to continue working and learning with me. I'm starting my semester at my training institute where I do master classes that are 5 months long, where I really teach you how to do therapy well. And we've got a couple options there. So I will invite you to do that at the end of this program. I do want to let you know that, I think I'm the only private CE institute that does client simulations, and we are going to do one teaching you how to use this method with an actual client. We're going to do like co-therapy. You're going to be my co-therapist if you want to join, or you can watch. But it's a mixed reality. We do live supervision. We have a real client. It's immediately, that time is wrong. It is 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific. My apologies. And you can sign up with this QR code, or you can go to therapythatworksinstitute.com/live simulations, and hopefully we'll get a copy of this link in the chat. And this one does cost a little because it is very technology intense, and so it's $29 if you want to join me for a live supervision to learn how to use this with the clients. We get into all the supervision nuance. So you're welcome to join me for that. And otherwise, let's look at what the goal is for this course. So at the end of this course, the end of an hour and a half here, I'm hoping you're going to be able to take this method and use it with your clients to make difficult decisions, both big ones and little ones. So in terms of the specifics, you're going to learn how important it is to really identify at least 2 or 3 possibilities when a client's faced with a difficult decision, and then learning the 3 key elements of each possible life option. And so we'll go through that. And then helping clients use 2 key factors to maximize long-term mental health and wellness when they're facing one of these decisions. And for lack of a better term, when you learn to make your decisions this way, and this is true for you and your clients, it really brings in a deep sense of peace, a sense of agency, a sense of empowerment. So even when the world around you isn't giving you the options you would like, and you're faced with really difficult life decisions that seem impossible, using the concepts in this method, you and your clients are going to be able to move through with just a lot more peace and agency. And it really makes a huge difference in your day-to-day level of happiness. So, yeah, I'm really excited about being able to share this with you. So in terms of obtaining your CEs, about half an hour before we got on this call, you should have received an email saying that you got the Decision Door Method course in your library, which means you're going to need to navigate back to the therapythatworksinstitute.com/login. And you need to log in with the email you used to register for this course. I happen to know many of you have many identities on my platform. So you got to find the one that the email was sent to saying you have the course. That's your login ID, is the full email. Then there is a quiz and a course evaluation. You need to do both of those. And then you hit submit on that, of course, evaluation, and you should get your CE within 5 minutes. It's an email. The email itself, it's got my signature on it, is your official certificate. And if you don't find it in your inbox, check your junk mail because that is where it goes to because there's a bit of automation involved. Okay, and so you will also get the email sent to you. I mean, instructions will be sent to you as well. So just remember to get your CEs. You go to the course, do the quiz, do the evaluation, search your email boxes when you are done submitting the course evaluation. Okay, and if you have trouble, you can always email the friendly help at dianegayhart.com. Okay, so let's get into it. 21st century realities. So as I assume everyone here knows, we are in the midst of a global mental health crisis. 13% of the global population has a major mental health diagnosis at any given time. But the rates are even higher for places like the United States, where this stat just blows my mind. 75% of US young adults, so that's anyone 25 and under, have a major mental health diagnosis by the time they reach age 25. Another fun stat here is 40% of US high school students report depression or suicidal thinking. And that was in 22, and that's the latest data from the CDC. So, and anxiety, typically, they're finding around 30% of the population. So there is a lot of mental health crisis going on. And even when there are more mental health providers than ever, it is more accessible than ever. There are more of us trying to help people than ever, but nonetheless, the rates are going up, not down. So let's look at why that might be. So when you look at your world today, our world today, you have climate disasters and climate change, an increased number of disasters, and so many of us are experiencing just unprecedented natural disasters. I live in Southern California. We've had multiple fires that are just unimaginable, kind of rage through where we are here. And that leaves years and years of trauma on a community. We have multiple political and social crises. We have multiple wars raging around the globe. I've been around for over 5 decades, and I've never experienced anything like this. And I think most people alive today, this is unprecedented. We've got polarized politics, not just in the United States, but around the globe. There's increased hate crimes, increased police brutality. There is a lot going on in our societies, making them much more unstable. I think it's very scary what's going on. I think most everyone can agree on that. And so looking at what is going on just in our societies are much more unstable. We have financial crises, we have housing, food crisis issues, inflation. All of these impact people in a very personal way. And we still have the effects of the global pandemic. I live in California. Apparently, there's another COVID wave coming through. Haven't heard that for a while. But there was still a loss of over 3 million people during the pandemic. And the long-term effects on those children and families are still being felt, right? And so we're living in this world that has so many unknowns, so many traumas, so many just unprecedented, right? That word gets overused. And so this is creating a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and that's fueling kind of the mental health epidemic that we are seeing. And one of the key themes that researchers are noticing is that the world is increasingly uncertain. Um, and as life becomes more uncertain and less predictable, it increases anxiety, depression, PTSD, and just creates lower overall resilience, right? And so many people are identifying this increasing uncertainty is a major driver of the mental health crisis, especially for adolescents and youth. And when you have so many unknowns, it becomes so difficult to make a decision and to make a decision you feel confident about. And also when you have so many unknowns, it becomes difficult because even when you do make a decision, life is throwing so many monkey wrenches into our plans. We have to keep pivoting and pivoting and pivoting. And each pivot is a decision. It's a major life decision. And so we're going to have to get better and better at making difficult decisions between options that we don't really care for. And it's really it's really not easy. For example, well, I'll consider with this bullet. So, and there is this research around uncertainty distress model. And so being able to tolerate uncertainty is associated with better mental health. And so this is something we need to cultivate in our clients for them to be able to have sustained mental health in the world today. And so even something as simple as, I've been living in Southern California, I guess, majority of my life. I certainly lived in multiple other places, but my 20s not here. Let's just say, let's just put it that way. I spent a good decade not in California. Um, but this is where I grew up. This is where I have my family. Um, but with just the climate change and the increase in fires, I've been faced with really difficult decisions. Many of you know I was trying to get to Hawaii. It didn't quite work out. It is still on my long-term to-do list. But we're faced with these very difficult decisions to make in terms of something you just thought was super stable, like I'm gonna live here and stay here and raise my kids here. There's so many monkey wrenches get thrown into what were at one point in history easy decisions to make to be stable on, right? We get all of these, unprecedented challenges coming in that makes it harder for some of the simplest life decisions that shouldn't be so difficult really become complex. And so we need a method for this. So, and so one of the things that has been well documented since the 20th century, one of the earlier findings, I would say, in the 20th century is the understanding that helplessness is highly correlated with significant mental health, specifically depression. Learned helplessness is one of the main kind of factors that was identified very early in our field's development as contributing to depression. And we do know that when you're feeling helpless, that it has a bigger effect when coming from people with lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And so this creating a sense of agency and empowering someone, which is what the decision door method does. And we'll be talking about, I have some friends who are like, you're not going to bring up, political, division and crisis. I'm like, I am going to bring it up. Yeah. And I know it's a hotly debated topic, but I'm going to, because here's what's really important is that when people are feeling marginalized and disempowered, helping them develop a sense of agency and empowerment is really important. And this method can do that. And it's not, brushing away the effects of marginalization, but we do need ways to really meaningfully, not just through cheerleading, because oftentimes people like try to empower through cheerleading. I'm like, no, 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 that's not enough to really create that psychological shift of mindset. And this method is very good for anyone who is feeling powerless and helpless in today's world, which I think many, many people are. I think it's a very common feeling at this time with so much uncertainty. And so just knowing that, if someone begins to feel helpless in a given situation, right, that maladaptive attributions, where this problem, is stable, it's internal or it's global, leads to greater depression and really augments the sense of trauma. So people can all go through the same traumatic event, but how you process it, how you talk about it, the story you tell yourself about it can augment or reduce your experience of trauma around difficult events. So realizing that when we talk with clients in situations where at one level, I think we can all agree there's a lot of powerlessness for a lot of people around the globe right now. And you can talk about it in ways that highlight that. And you certainly don't want to minimize, you want to recognize, let's say, a huge injustice, right? We've got wars that are raging, and it's the humanitarian crises in those wars is horrific, right? So you don't want to minimize any of that. However, if you just stay there, if you stay in the languaging and the discourse of this is horrific, this is terrible, this should have never happened, and you don't give your clients a way to see a path, a little path through it where there's some agency and there's some empowerment, they're going to be more depressed and more traumatized. And so it's real important when you're working with people who are feeling marginalized and powerless, that you really think about how you language what's going on and how you frame things so that, even if it's oftentimes we don't have a whole lot of power, but where you do have power, you are exercising the choices that you have. And so that is something, I'm assuming most people listening know the story of Viktor Frankl, who was a psychologist who was imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps. back in the, during the World War II. And he talked about how even in these extreme circumstances that I would hope and pray no one ever has to experience, although I do believe there are a fair number of people experiencing those type of circumstances on the globe today, that even in those most dark, inhumane, unspeakable conditions, that there still is free will choice. There is, you still can hold on to your sense of humanity, free will choice, and find meaning and purpose. And so we will be drawing on some existential work because I think it's very relevant in today's world. And so this is where you hold on to your sanity, you hold on to a sense of being empowered, you hold on to your humanity even in the darkest of times. Because this also gets to the other side of the equation is this concept of what they call hope fatigue. As in general, hope usually has positive psychological effects for people. So in general, as mental health professionals, we want to engender hope in our clients. I consciously choose the music I listen to, the movies I watch, the people I talk to, the friends I keep close. Because I know that I need to hold out hope for humanity, even if I'm just the only one holding a candle sometimes in that room. And so to do that, I shift how I live, right? I don't, I'm very conscious about that. But and giving up hope has very significant psychological implications. People can become very depressed. Um, However, there is a dark side to hope in that if we're trying to give people unrealistic hope, right, that distances them from reality, if it's like a Pollyanna, pie in the sky, not realistic sense of hope, that's not good either. Because, what can happen is we've set them up to hope for something unrealistically, get their, hopes up, and then they crash. And so they fall into hopelessness and crisis. And so that's where we have to become good, I think, as mental health professionals at helping clients realistically navigate hope and to have hope in realistic ways. And so there's this real balance that we have to play. So as we're talking about these decision doors and making difficult decisions, this um, helping clients assess how much hope to have that's sort of realistic. Obviously, we're not psychic, but we can talk through these things, and it's real important that we do some of that because there is also this concept of hope fatigue where people give up having hope because their situations have been so hopeless for so long. So when we look at our mental health theories that we inherited, they're largely all developed in the 20th century. We have long-term goals that define mental health that are helpful. I'm not against any of this. I think all of this is good. However, it is totally insufficient for the challenges that we face in the 21st century. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about my unifying framework is that I think the 20th century had therapeutic models that got us going. And they worked a lot better in that century when life was much more predictable than they do in today's world, where there's so many things that are unpredictable. So if we look at just classic psychodynamic, right, they talk about ego strength and having secure attachment. Great things, using fewer defense mechanisms. I'm for all that. But, secure attachment alone isn't going to help you weather what is going on in society, around the globe and all of the uncertainties that we get hit with. It's just not enough for the level of stress that we have to live with on a ongoing basis. And it's stress at multiple levels. It's just not in our heads anymore, in our families. It is at a societal level that we have to navigate. Then you have self-actualization from humanism and experiential therapies. Again, this is really great, but self-actualization is so much more difficult in the 21st century where you can't control all those variables, right? We hear a lot about how today's youth, they don't have the same kind of at least confidence or belief that if you, graduate, do well in high school, go on and that'll get you into a good college, it'll get you onto a good career that'll allow you to have a nice, stable financial, future. Like that path was pretty guaranteed, or at least pretty reliable back in the 20th century. But in the 21st century, we know lots and lots of stories, right? Of people did everything, they checked all the boxes, they did everything they were supposed to do, but the promised path forward did not materialize. And so this is where self-actualization is much harder in these circumstances, right? Because you can't control all those variables. And if all you're focusing on being the true authentic self, I mean that's a lovely goal, but you're navigating in a world where all these variables are affecting how you can even possibly express your true authentic self. You're looking at CBT and systems theories. Both of these approaches are very much focused on symptom reduction, which is what insurance companies will pay for. About it. That's about all they'll pay for. And so again, symptom reduction is not going to help you develop the resilience you need to really survive in this highly unpredictable world with multiple crises, societal level crises. And in postmodernism, they do talk about agency. And so agency we'll be talking about today as well, because that is really the key forward. But preferred narratives, trying to enact your preferred narrative, classic goal in solution focused therapy, they talk about enacting the preferred solution, which are great. But those preferred narratives and solutions are like, only work if all the variables outside of you are relatively stable, and they're not. So even if you have your, ideal solution or preferred, narrative, this self-identity narrative you want to enact, there's just so many monkey wrenches getting thrown into it all that you're going to feel very frustrated in doing that. So all of these are great. I have nothing against any of these, but it doesn't develop the resilience that you need, I think, to navigate the world the way it is today, this unpredictable, uncertain world. And so just in general, too, the general grand narrative of pursuing happiness, right? Like in the United States, we talk about the right to pursue happiness as such a fundamental dominant narrative and discourse here. But that is going to get you into a lot of trouble because getting what you want from life is so much harder because there's so much more unpredictability, and basically monkey wrenches keep getting thrown into your plans, into all of our plans. And so learning how to develop resilience is really the key. And the term I like to use, and so in developing my unifying framework, my therapy that works unifying framework, which I've developed over the last decade or so it's designed for the 21st century. The concept I have used is this concept of equanimity. And equanimity really comes from Buddhist psychology. And we see some of this in similar concepts in third wave approaches like dialectic behavior therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's about moving gracefully with life's ups and downs. And so one of the things I hope you leave today with is understanding that if you're using kind of more traditional psychotherapeutic theory definitions of long-term health and wellness and goals, that you're going to need to add this concept of equanimity or resilience, whatever you want to call it, but moving gracefully with life's ups and downs is key because there are just so many more things that are unpredictable that we cannot simply plan and control the way we could to a greater degree. Obviously, it was never perfect in the 20th century, but to a greater degree, there was more certainty, or at least there was the illusion of more certainty. And I would say, statistically speaking, there were a lot fewer monkey wrenches messing with plans. And this is really going to be essential in the 21st century. And this is something that's not achieved in one session, but it's achieved in multiple sessions over time. And so fairly recently, I had a client who I'd been working with. In her teens, she had gone through very difficult childhood abuse. But I've been working and planting the seeds. And you plant the seeds of equanimity by noticing that when things are really good, that they're good right now, they were worse before, and they'll probably ebb and flow. You notice when things are worse, right? When things get more challenging, what are the options? How do you move forward? You do a lot of this decision door stuff, but noting that things will often shift. And then you have the med times that are just kind of in between, and learning how to become okay with that and learning how to move with the challenges and knowing that when challenges come into your life, it's not this terrible, bad, awful, wrong thing that, should never have happened. It's just, a challenge has come into your life and it's time to learn, you need to figure out how to navigate it, right? And so learning to not freak out and panic every time there is a challenge that was unpredicted manifests. And so my client, She does identify LGBTQ, and she's at a school in Oregon, which is on the liberal end of the spectrum. And so after the United States elections last year and Donald Trump got voted in, we got on the phone or on Zoom to do a session. I just asked how she was doing, and she said, well, everyone around me is kind of freaking out and panicking and very, very worried about what's going to happen in the coming year. And she goes, so everyone's like spiraling out and they're freaking out. And I said, and how are you? And she said, Diane, I'm okay. Because from working with you, I have learned I will get through this too. And so here it is. She's 19. She's young. She's part of Gen Z, right? And but yet at 19, because we've been working together for several years by this point, at least 3 or 4 years, she had developed enough of a sense of equanimity, because even though what was happening, has affected her very significantly, she still knows she's going to weather it. She still knows she has choice. And we're going to talk about the choice because we use decision doors with her, or I use decision doors with her, right? She knew she was going to be okay. And that's what equanimity brings. That's what this sense of resilience. It's not that it was okay that everything was happening. It's not that she was, blasé about it all and not worried. There was definitely worry and concern and difficulty. She had some very difficult conversations with family members. But there was this sense that she was going to be okay. That's the equanimity. That's what this gives you. Um, that's what this decision door method is about, and it helps cultivate this sense of equanimity. She's just got a new set of doors we're going to have to navigate. We'll figure out which one is the best option. We'll move through that, knowing that, down the road there'll be other doors, to choose from. But it's realizing that this is how you can move forward in life and that you're not powerless. And when that really sinks in for you, and I hope you're going to have this sink in for you first, and you're able to impart that to your clients, and it's a very subtle way you do that. It really does change their default level of mental health, because there is this innate sense of things are going to be okay, even if it's all hectic and crazy and insane right now. So let's look at some of the decision door foundations. So there are two main foundations, and there are a lot more that we could toss in here, but I'm trying to keep it simple. If you're familiar with the unifying framework, I synthesize over 50 theories into one. So depending on what theory you're most familiar with, you may have a different, approach. But I do think you're going to hear and see a lot of existential therapy concepts in this method. And the two most key concepts are embracing free will choice and taking full responsibility for your decisions. So if you remember back to existentialism, we all have free will choice, but we also have responsibility, right? And you get more. So those two things kind of counterbalance. You're going to hear those themes come up really clearly in this decision door method. The other thing you're going to hear is this a lot of this Buddhist psychology concept of what they call radical acceptance. And so radical acceptance is not just rolling over and saying, oh, well, whatever, this XYZ horrible thing is happening to me or happening in my community or happening in society, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's not resignation. It's a very conscious, it's a conscious acknowledgement of a reality. And I think the best way to describe this is looking at interpersonal violence, right? So radical acceptance that you're in a violent relationship doesn't mean that you're like, oh, well, I married the wrong person, they're violent, and so I guess I have to live with this. That's not what this is. It's what it is that it's the emotional and cognitive full acceptance that the person I married is violent with me. And even though we're now in this honeymoon phase, right? The violence may be ended. We've been swept into honeymoon phase where they're saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to go to therapy, and this will never happen again. When you're in honeymoon phase, radical acceptance is like, yeah, I'm glad you're doing all that, but you're still violent. And especially when it's happened 2 or 3 times, it's like, and we have a pattern of you being violent. And so you don't allow yourself to slip into denial or suppression or repression, that you stay connected to the truth, and you make a decision you take action based on it. You don't allow yourself to kind of lull into denial, suppression, repression, whatever good psychodynamic technique you want to use to avoid a painful reality. And so with the decision doors, that's part of it. We help clients stay connected with the reality of each possibility and not sugarcoat or minimize or otherwise kind of escape some of the fullness of the reality. And so this the Buddhist psychology here around radical acceptance, you'll see some people have said this, some of these concepts kind of echo in DBT and ACT, the acceptance commitment therapy, and that's because they are informed by Buddhist psychology. So if you're familiar with some of what's called third wave CBTs, this will probably resonate, where there is this taking full responsibility for your choice and your response to a situation in a very conscious way. But I would say the philosophical foundations are existential and Buddhist psychology, and there are some, approaches out there where that have used some of these concepts. But I would say the vast majority of theoretical models do not draw upon this level of kind of conscious choice around difficult decisions. So, and this model itself really evolved from the unifying framework, the therapy that works unifying framework that I've developed, which is, in a nutshell, a single evidence-informed approach that you use with all of your clients. And it's a system for doing. It's not a theory that explains why people have problems, which existentialism does, right? Or psychodynamic or humanism or even CBT, they explain why we have problems. This is just a system for what you do in the room. It's a crystal clear roadmap for how to have great results. It's one framework for all your clients. And it synthesizes over 50 different theories, which is why I identified 2 theoretical foundations. I could actually do more, but I'm trying to keep it simple. But looking at all of this, and so in this approach, when we get to case conceptualization, we look at what's called this 4-level assessment that I'm going to describe to you because it's related to the decision door method. And so when we're looking at someone's making a difficult decision, let's say whether to stay in a difficult marriage or to leave it, we can always line up more options or more doors. We're going to look at not just the obvious, let's say, implications, but we're going to look at it at all 4 of these main levels. And you can see in this model, I use a lot of the systemic assessment of symptoms, not just symptoms at their worst or at their best, but looking at when are symptoms their least severe, what does it look like when the tension rises, the symptom, intensifies, symptom at its worst, and how do things go back to normal? When we look at this ebb and flow of the problem, and so we look at this at the behavioral level, what are people doing and saying, right? We look at it at the emotional level, so both attachment level emotions, like feelings, how safe do I feel emotionally, as well as, the secondary emotions like anger or sadness that are more clearly expressed. The cognitive level, which are beliefs, as well as your identity narratives. And then finally, the societal level, right? Your social location and how that is affecting all of the options and problems that you experience as we look at each door. So when you're working with clients and analyzing the various options in their lives, you're not just going to notice, what are the things you want and what are the potential problems. When you do that, you're going to try to get nuanced and think about the implications of each possibility on all 4 of these levels, not just a surface level pros and cons list. So let's jump into the decision door method. So the first step is you're going to identify the doors or options. So you want to try to get 3 to 5 doors if possible, at least 2, even if the client doesn't like doors. So very often when I'm talking with clients who've had chronic severe mental health issues, I will talk about medication. As evidence, the research base says you are a prime candidate who would benefit from medication. And a lot of my clients want to just slam that door shut. No, I'll never take medication. I'll never do it. And so that is a choice that they're making. And so with clients like that, I will still line up in treatment planning. Sometimes I will line up decision doors, right? Just from the very beginning of treatment, because they're slamming the door shut on medication, which is a choice, right? But it doesn't mean that door still existed and it still exists. But what I do is I say, okay, at this point, you don't want to try medication. Then let's look at some of the other options to address some of the things going on with you. But let's talk about the pros of taking medication, right? And the negatives and what you're worried about. I'll talk through that so I really understand that. And I say, okay, so that is one option you're choosing not to take. And I will often say, depending on the client, that maybe in 2 or 3 months, if everything else we try to do if things aren't getting better, we can always come back to this option. So you do when you identify options that they've just ruled out, oh, I would never do that, is that you're shifting up the narrative so that they see they had agency and choice, right? And it highlights that. And you're also planting the seeds that if the other option they make doesn't work out, we still have these other options down the road. There's always another set of doors to look at, but it increases their sense of agency and empowerment. It's like, I have decided to not take medication for XYZ reasons. And, if things get really bad down the road, I have a clear understanding of what the pros and cons are of that door. And so you're identifying the doors, even if clients from the get-go, would never consider them. And so it's real important to line these doors up. And then for each door, you're going to look at the pros, the positives, the known problems, and the potential risks. And so we'll go over that in a little more detail. And then the key to this whole method is that you're going to select the door, not by the shiny objects you want on the other side, but you're going to pick the door with the problems and risks you're willing to live with without complaining when they manifest, because it's a package deal. And there's something about human psychology where we like to kind of pretend like, I just want the shiny stuff, but I shouldn't have any of the problems that come with that shiny stuff. And so the key really is that you process the different options and you discuss the known problems and risks. And when you take action, right, you cross the threshold of that door, you do so knowing you had free will choice and you chose this door with all of its benefits, problems, and risks with your free will choice, and you take full responsibility for what comes after. Now, if everything goes awful, there's always another set of doors down the road. Okay? There's one set of doors after another. But when you make a choice, you're helping your coaching, you're helping your clients get to a place where they do so very consciously with the known problems. Let's just go back to the person who's got this relationship where there is violence, right? So if you choose to stay in the relationship, what are the known problems and risks, right? Problems is the violence could happen again. It could get worse, right? You can go through what that looks like. And so versus, deciding to leave, right? You probably have a difficult divorce ahead of you. You have, financial, factors that come with that. The violence may or may not stop, right? So, but talking through it all so that you lay out the various possibilities. And of course, there are a lot of in-betweens. Let's go to a certain type of therapy, or let's try X, Y, or Z. So lining up those possibilities and very consciously choosing between often very, very difficult circumstances. So the basic anatomy is the shiny stuff you want on the other side, what you want. And by default, humans tend to make decisions based only on this part of the door. But what comes with that are the known problems, right? So what you know is going to happen, and then the potential risks. And so for me, as someone, so what happened for me, a very surprising decision I ended up making during the pandemic. I had kids who were in elementary school and were supposed to be going to middle school during the pandemic. And my kids had been in a tiny little private school where I work. So I got a good deal there in a little school. And the pandemic hit and they were in accelerated programs. And the school district closed their accelerated programs and were online for 2 years. And so I had a very difficult decision to make where I have these kids where the school I was planning to put them into was no longer going to be the right fit for my kids, right? And I had to risk sending them someplace where they could spiral out of control. Or, I looked at, other paid options to keep them in accelerated programs, and I was going to have to pay some money. And so I ended up deciding so I weighed out my doors. One is to hope and pray and cross my fingers that the option we had that didn't have the program for them would work. And the other one was to figure out how to make some more money, add another third job at the time to make sure that my kids ended up in a place where they're more likely to be successful. And really that came down to what risk was I willing to take in terms of the guilt I would have if I hadn't done everything in my power to get my kids through the pandemic. I just know myself, I'm so guilt-ridden. I was not going to be able to live with that one, right? Other people in my situation may not have made that. They're like, no, they're going to be fine. I know I can help them weather it. Each one is fine. And that's where you want to let your clients figure out what set of problems and risks they're willing to take. That's really their decision. It's never ours. And people make very different decisions than we might make. But it's once you cross that threshold, then it's like, well, I signed up to take on a third job to get my kids through the pandemic education. Okay. So that means I don't get to whine and complain on the weekends when I'm having to work longer hours, right? And we had to adjust how much time playtime I had, or fun time I had with my kids. And so that was a set of known problems that needed to be navigated. And where I think people get into trouble is they make a decision where there are known problems, and then they really resent that the problems came with the benefit, or vice versa. Or if I, sent them to the school that I knew was a bad fit, and then for me to be, angry and, screaming and hiring attorneys to fight the school district would also be kind of not right. I'd have to have a better method, or unless I decided that was going to be my method. But even if I was going to hire attorneys, then don't do it like you're shocked that this school isn't working out for my son, because I saw that coming. So, so realizing that when you pick a door, you're picking a certain set of problems. And so I work with my clients then to talk through if you're going to choose this door, these are the problems and risks, how are we going to handle them? And we talk through them. And oftentimes that's one of the success stories a student just told me, is that they were talking with a client and the client was thinking they wanted one door, but when they talked through the known problems, the client was like, oh, no, 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 I can't do that. So let's find a different possibility. So talking through these known problems and risks, making peace with that and not kind of sugarcoating or kind of wishing them away or kind of doing the denial sweep is where this really becomes very powerful in working with our clients and ourselves. So there are three key elements to the decision door. The first is this concept of radical acceptance of current realities, which we already touched on, but we'll go a little more into depth. The other is conscious free will choice. And the third piece is taking responsibility for the negative outcomes. So let's look at this radical acceptance of reality again. Like I said, it comes from Buddhist concepts. And it's really about accepting reality the way it is, rather than lament current circumstances without action. Now, when you're facing things like oppression and injustice, and I think there's a lot of unspeakable, inhumane things transpiring around the globe as we speak right now, and it doesn't mean you don't acknowledge the injustice and the inhumanity, right? Or what's wrong in the world. You do acknowledge it, but you don't get stuck. You don't get pulled into kind of this negative downward spiral of hopelessness. So you can acknowledge it, you name it, but then you say, what are my options given this often terrible reality in front of me? What are my options? And so this is what's really key here. And the idea here is to encourage skillful action. So it's not resignation or complacency. So you see injustice in the world and you feel powerless, right? And I think there are a lot of ways I feel powerless right now. I think many people are feeling that around the globe. You need to recognize the injustice, but also know in the face of that, we still have choices. Often they're very limited. Often they're not satisfying, but there is still free will choice at a certain level, even if a lot of it is in our conscious mind. And that's where this method is so powerful, is that you consciously take responsibility for the choices in front of you. At least, even if you're faced with some awful options, to realize that you're still choosing, right? And so it creates a sense of agency in this increasingly unpredictable, uncontrollable world. And it really is the key to equanimity. So for example, I have decided to stay in my home, which is very fire prone in Southern California, right? And so I realized I have free will choice. I could move, I could leave. In fact, I did try to leave. It didn't quite work out. Of course, I was moving, whoopsie, to another fire prone area. Um, but what that means is that I've decided to stay here, right? And so that means I have responsibility as well to like fireproof my house. There's something called fire hardening your home. I never heard of it till a couple years ago, but so I'm taking money I'd really rather spend on something else, putting in fireproof fence and clearing a 5-foot perimeter around my property, so But because I have chosen this, right, I can feel like, okay, this is what I have decided to do. This is the logical next step. And I think human psychology, left to our own devices, we don't connect those dots the way we need to. And that's where I think this method can be really helpful. And that's where you're responsible for the outcome. So knowing the known problems and the potential risks, and that so each time you choose a door, there's this full package of the positives and the negatives you get, right? And so realizing you're choosing that full package and you're willing to work with them and making peace and obviously trying to mitigate whatever that is. And so, and I think what's so difficult, and I think where a lot of us get hung up naturally, is that a lot of us are being forced to make decisions that, in an ideal world, we would not have to be making. It does not feel fair. It does not feel just. It does not feel right. And yet here we are having to make those decisions. And so again, the concept is recognizing, that oftentimes we're put in very unfair and positions that ideally we wouldn't have to be. And after that kind of emotion, work through that is realize, but then still you have free will choice and our clients have free will choice. And that's just psychologically so important to recognize. And the other thing is knowing there's always more doors down the road. Life is just one set of doors after another. So the most common applications, and I think this is what a lot of people, ask, what are the big decisions, right? So divorce, marriage, career change, moves. I think these things were put in the chat at the beginning of this workshop. Definitely the most common applications, but increasingly everyday decisions are, it's surprisingly beneficial to use this method, even with little things like just how you prioritize the time in your day, sleeping, work, friends, doom scrolling, right? How are you prioritizing your time? How are you prioritizing, how you spend money? I have a course called the Financially Thriving Clinician where I kind of basically use this same method. We have a limited amount of time and a little bit amount of money. Those are finite resources in our life. And most of us don't have enough to go around of either. But when you sit down and you consciously choose how to use your limited resources, your sense of empowerment and agency goes up significantly. And it really boosts your mental health. And so even for these little things, how we're spending time, money, relaxation versus work-life balance, where you travel, weekend plans, all of these things. These are seemingly small, but if you learn how to use this decision door method, even with the little things, it really creates a sense of empowerment because I don't feel like I have enough time or money in my life. I'm assuming everyone listening here has a similar experience. But what if we flip the script on that and realize we do have choice? You chose, if you're here live today, you chose to spend time learning about this. And so you have free will choice. And realizing that and exercising and consciously embracing it increases our sense of agency and empowerment and control over our destinies. And psychologically, that reduces anxiety, depression, and even the symptoms of trauma. Now, what are the contraindications? Certainly, if someone is experiencing suicidal thoughts, right? Decision doors is not for that, or homicidal thoughts, or any type of crisis situation. This would not be a really great intervention for crisis moments like that. You're going to use your standard operating procedures of how we stabilize crisis. But also, if someone has very limited ability for whatever reason to emotionally forecast, I mean, you can help your clients emotionally forecast and be realistic. And I sometimes have to negotiate. Are you sure you're going to be okay with that, right? But if there's just a limited ability for whatever reason to assess risk, realistic outcomes, whether it's, whatever the reason is. So people who just have a harder time, imagining the future, this would not be a good, or weighing pros and cons for whatever reason. Could be a mental health issue that they have, cognitive or an experience, whatever. So it's not like for every decision you're going to be using this, and certainly not for things like suicidal or homicidal thoughts. And what is your role in all of this? It's really to remain 100% neutral. Okay. And I think we've all been trained to do this around domestic violence as difficult. And that's a very difficult thing to do, I think, as a professional. But the client needs to not feel like clinician is advocating for one door over another. And so you have to be really careful how you set things up and to make it really clear and how you set your therapeutic relationship up so they're not feeling like you're advocating for one door over another. And so this is just really, really a key skill. It's one of the things, one of the reasons I'm doing the simulation after this is so that I think most of us are not aware of how our opinion slips out through our language in very subtle ways. And so that's really, really important. And you'll notice if, hopefully you'll notice if clients feel pushed in one direction or another, this doesn't work as well. So you being 100% neutral, I mean, and that's one thing I think that's come with me over 3+ decades of doing this work is I have just learned that people, when they have to make these difficult decisions, I don't have the answer for them. You know what? I have multiple clients who are in a situation where they're in a relationship where they've been in it for 2 or 3 decades. They're getting towards mid-late life. The kids have launched. They're starting to retire, and they have nothing in common except the kids. You know, one wants to travel, the other one doesn't. The one wants to move near the kids, the other one won't leave their friends, right? I mean, they're constantly like push and pull. Everything is a major compromise, right? This is, there's still love there, right? But it's like everything's a fight. And so it's really difficult. And I don't have a dog in that fight, man. I don't envy their decision that they have to make because they don't have it. We can line up the doors and none of them look real appealing. Okay. I'm just telling you. And so just I think staying humble and realizing these are difficult life decisions. I don't want to push anyone through any one of those doors. I don't envy my clients in this type of position. There are other situations where I do have a stronger opinion. But again, you know, I've come to realize who am I to tell someone, you know, when it's time to leave and when it's not, how much, you know, emotional abuse is worth putting up and how much is not. That's not our job. And the consequences are really difficult, and not everyone can handle every set of problems that they're, you know, sent out. And so there, I've worked with clients who are like, I will not take that divorce door no matter what happens in this relationship because of X, Y, and Z reason. Okay, well, let's look what other doors we can find, you know, given if that's where you're at. So I never give up looking for different doors, right? But I'm working with clients and my clients know that I really respect whatever it is because I know you're picking a set of problems you can live with, and that's not easy. So we already talked about identifying all the doors, even the ones you know, even so, if they're like, I'll never divorce in a million years, I'm like, okay, so, but let's just look at why not? Let's look at what the risks and the known problems are and why you refuse to take those risks and known problems for those benefits. Just putting that into words is very empowering and clarifies their values. And so it's an important step of this. And so embracing free will choice really does matter. You're going to have more positive affect and mood, greater life satisfaction, less difficulty making decisions, more satisfied with whatever decision that you make, like you're willing to live with those consequences, and experiencing a sense of freedom and control and autonomy, even in this really crazy world that we're living in right now. And so, for example, a lot, you know, I have clients who are very distraught. I live in Southern California again, so we got the fires. We also have ice raids, even in my local neighborhood here. And so looking at, we've got some very, I mean, previously unfathomable circumstances in our own neighborhood on our streets, right? We had military on the streets here in LA. Um, and so, but looking at all those possibilities, and even, you know, with many of my clients who are very distressed by this, I have them look at the door. You have leaving this country or this state is an option, right? And the pushback, I don't want to, you shouldn't have to. I'm like, no, you shouldn't have to consider this. Correct. Although I have several friends who have moved and are super happy in other countries. So I, I actually have evidence to the contrary. Um, but even if in a million years, my client's like, I'm not going to move. I'm like, but still explore, just know what it is, right? And I think it's a very helpful exercise to create a sense of autonomy and empowerment. And so this is really important with all sorts of decisions. So, like the key here really is what we call befriending reality. And so this is where I think a lot of us, we kind of confuse reality and what humans are capable of and what the world is like today and the ideal where we would like it for it to be in a perfect world. And there's always a pretty big gap here. And I think the most obvious thing here is, there's ideally, here's a good example. Ideally, everyone should be kind and nice to everyone else all the time. They should always be fair and just. That's the ideal we strive for. We all know this is where humans actually perform, and there's a gap. And so we want to keep moving towards our ideal, taking real world action to be kinder and nicer, surround ourselves with kinder, nicer people. But we all know we're going to still encounter people who are not kind, who are not nice. And we want to recognize that and deal with it and hopefully be proactive in how we respond to those situations. But we don't want to spiral into anxiety, depression, and hopelessness every time the outside world doesn't meet our ideals. And just knowing that realistically, there's always going to be a gap there, and we need a plan for how to respond when life doesn't kind of match up the way we ideally think it should be without giving up hope and still organizing our life towards enacting those ideals. And I've dedicated my life to be the best, kindest person I can, right? To live those ideals, but knowing that it's unrealistic to expect everyone else to be living at that level as well. Researchers have talked about two forms of tolerance we need most in the world today. And one is tolerating uncertainty, which really helps with anxiety. Anxiety is all about feeling this lack of control, where tolerating struggle is just the ability to um, know that challenges come in and it's okay that I'm being challenged right now, that there's this struggle that is coming into my life. And a lot of this struggle is really with the internet coming in. We have such instant gratification in so many areas of our life. We've that ability to struggle is weakened in all of us, even those who've been around for a long time. Oh my God, when a web page takes more than 10 seconds to load, I just watch my own response. I'm like, seriously, Diane? Like just let the page load. But there's this frustration, this reactivity we have because we're not used to struggling. We want instant gratification. But there is a lot of uncertainty in today's world and a lot of struggle. And we need to consciously teach our children and our clients how to navigate uncertainty and struggle. So I want to talk about applying this method. And so there are three elements, again, just to review what you want. That's why most of us pick our doors. Then there are the known problems and the potential risks. And I don't necessarily, I do, you can do pros and cons. People are familiar with that. Different problems, have more known problems and clear risks. Sometimes the problems and risks are kind of intermingled, almost like on a spectrum. So I don't get too rigid with these. But I do think about it on all four levels, thinking about the behavioral, the emotional consequences, right? The cognitive and societal level discourses that are going on. So you want to be thinking about all of these different levels. And it's real important to have this work within the client's meaning-making system. Those of you familiar with the unifying framework, I talk a lot about entering the client's meaning-making system. And so it's their unique way of interpreting life and what's important and what's not. And this comes from their value system, their personal, cultural, family values. And even within a family, they all have very unique value systems and different. So the meaning-making system is how you interpret the world around you. And so this is what's going to inform what's really important to them, what's problematic and what's not. Different people have different definitions of what's problematic and what's not, right? And what risk is worth taking, what risk is not. What are you willing to live with and what are you not? These are very, very personal, and we have to do it within their worldview, their value system, and not impose our own. So we really have to step out of our own meaning-making system to enter theirs, which is a difficult thing to do. And I spend probably half of the Unifying Framework course is teaching people how to do this well. But there is this profound respect for free will choice that really comes with this therapeutic neutrality. So let's look real quickly at using the decision door method for divorce. This is just an example based on a client I saw recently. You can have another client facing divorce who would fill out kind of their pros and cons list differently. So this is just a sample from one of my clients. So one is to stay in the unhappy marriage, right? So the benefits, you have a sense of stability, stability for the kids, and financially it's beneficial. Okay, the known problems are, staying is that they're very unhappy. There's no real sex life going on. The kids are watching them fight, and they really don't enjoy their personal life. They don't like coming home. And the risks are they could become even more depressed, affairs, or there still could be a divorce. The other person could decide to divorce if they decide to stay, right? Then there's moving forward with the divorce. So hopefully there'll be eventually less arguing. They have a chance for a happy relationship and there's just reduced stress. But we know that there's going to be financial struggle. We know that oftentimes there's going to be an ugly divorce, separate homes for the kids. The children will probably be destabilized for a while, right? So, and some of the risks are you may never find someone better, right? You may regret it. The kids may blame you. So there are all these negative things to talk about. And then for this particular client that was going back and trying therapy again, we tried to look for a third door. I stretch. Well, work with clients to find, well, what other possibilities do we have? Let's give it one more try. There would be probably less guilt. The kids, this case, they were going to do it more publicly so the kids knew that they were trying. Known problems. The partner is resistant, so they don't even know if they get the partner to say yes. It's expensive, didn't work before, and they really didn't think their marriage was fixable. So you can see how this can work, and different people facing divorce would have very different decision doors. But you put all this together, and it's like, what set of known problems and risks are you willing to live with, right? And boy, I don't have an opinion here because it's a very, very personal and difficult decision to make. So with a job offer, right? So that's a very common one. So one is staying in your current position where you kind of know what the problems are, you know who the problem players are, but maybe you're unsatisfied here. So you kind of know what the pros and cons are, and the risks are you might get stuck here, right? And for some people, then you have taking a new position. This was based on someone who had a job offer. So there was higher pay, the work was more interesting, and there was a bit of a promotion. So it was a pretty shiny object on the other side of that door. But you don't know if the boss is going to be better and worse. And that was one of the reasons they were leaving the last job. So there's no guarantee, right? Especially you do the best you can. You don't know the people, and the stress may actually be higher, right? It is a promotion. And you may end up regretting it all. And then when we look for other doors, then is to just stay where you're at and keep looking, right? So the benefits are a better opportunity might happen. There's an unknown timetable. You're stepping into the unknown if you wait, right? So, and you may have regret that you didn't take the offer. So we put all these together, and which set of problems can you live with right now? Which one makes the most sense for you at this time in history? And so knowing there's always another set of doors down the road, but kind of working through it this way so that it's clear that they're consciously using their free will choice to decide on a particular set of problems. So regret doesn't set in and they don't beat themselves up or, I don't know, get mad at someone else if things don't end up as planned. Especially when you're looking at job decisions or divorce decisions. I do something I call spreadsheet therapy, which is when you have a decision, you're doing decisions that involve finances, which many decisions do. I have my clients create a spreadsheet for each option. And it really creates a sense of agency and things being concrete. And I once had a client who was facing a very difficult job transition decision, and he kind of resisted making the spreadsheets for 6 full months. Oh my God. I was like, dude, do the spreadsheet on this. And I actually talked to clients like this particular client I talked to like that. And when he finally did it, he's like, oh my God, Diane, that was so helpful. Because one was to leave the job like today. You had a bad day at work and you're just saying, I'm out of here. One was to do it in 6 months, a year, 5 years. So, he just ran the numbers. And so it added so much clarity. So on those days where you want to tell someone to take this job and shove it, you know what the number is in the spreadsheet that goes with saying that. And so it was very empowering for him to know. And what he realized is I could walk away today and financially I would be okay. And that really helped navigate how to move forward and how to make decisions. Now, he didn't end up using that option. He ended up using a much longer term plan because he wanted, some different pros. But just knowing that brought so much peace. And so whether it's career or divorce or grad school, someone had in the chat at the beginning here, knowing that spreadsheet and where your off ramps are, especially if you're in a difficult work situation, is, or a relationship situation, having the spreadsheet, knowing that you could be okay if you walk away today is a real important thing to know. And it's interesting in our field how we don't encourage our clients to do this, I think, enough. I'm going to keep moving forward here, but I guess in a nutshell, I will share the story about using this with finances. It was during the pandemic. I was taking my kids to Hawaii, and we're in the airport, and my son sees these pair of very expensive headphones, the Sony WH-1000 XM5s. And he started this whole campaign. It was hilarious. Mom, I want these headphones. They were $300. And I said, no way in the world am I going to buy you $300 headphones. I know what you're thinking. Especially we're leaving on this trip. It's so expensive, and I budgeted, and la 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 la. And so, but he started making a joke of, he's a comedian, so about how it would bring family harmony to have these headphones. It's not just for his pleasure. He won't be fighting with his younger brother, and then I can relax more, on vacation because he won't be talking at me the whole time. So anyway, we had this, went on for about 24 hours. He was making all these jokes about the Sony headphones he really wanted, and I said, I got and it was funny, but he was really insistent. And I said, I have a deal for you. If you can figure out how to save $300 that I was going to spend another way, I will let you get these headphones. Because he had one morning at breakfast, they poured him, the waiter came to the table and said, would you like a glass of orange juice? And we didn't do the buffet. So he just said yes, which was a $5 glass of orange juice with, $2 of tax and tip on top of it. And then he didn't drink it till at the end. I had to say, you're drinking that orange juice. We just paid a lot for it. So what I did is to help him realize financial responsibility and decision making, as I said, if you can save up by having no ice cream or just one scoop instead of two scoops, because I'd budgeted for two scoops. And if you're a parent, you understand how expensive ice cream is, and you've got to budget for that on a trip nowadays. So I had budgeted everything out. I said, if you can save 300 from what I had planned, you can buy the headphones with the savings. So he and his brother kicked in because it was something they were going to share. They just spent the whole trip then, making decision doors. Is it worth having one scoop or no scoops of ice cream to be able to put $10 towards the headphones? Is it worth having the orange juice he did away with, right? Easy $7 every morning. So we started doing, knickknacks and, do you want this t-shirt or do you want your headphones? And so so this is a really powerful way to teach your children. And I actually use this in my Financially Thriving Mental Health Clinician course. And I've had such positive feedback where people are like, I feel so empowered about, how I'm handling finite money, time and money. Those two things are like correlated. It's really empowering. And I also want to say that using this in the face of injustice is more important than ever. Because when you are facing injustice, yes, you need to name it, and it is okay to complain for a little bit about when you're seeing and to really let that touch your heart. And more than just complain, I think to feel the sorrow I think that many of us are feeling when we read the news these days, right? So to feel it and to complain about it, there's a certain amount of time where I think you want to allow you and your clients to name it and feel it and be aware and recognize the injustice. But you don't want to get stuck in it or get stuck. I've seen people get stuck in very righteous indignation, right? This shouldn't be happening. 110% agree. How do we get it not to happen, though, is the next step. What happens is sometimes people get caught in these discourses and loops where it brings more hopelessness, more anxiety, more depression, and this learned helplessness. I can't do anything, right? And most of us are not in a position to make huge dents in what we're seeing in the world, but we can do something. And that is important psychologically, that we can always do something to contribute to more goodness in the world around us. And so some form of action, I would argue, is always required in the face of injustice. Because sitting there and doing nothing and feeling helpless and hopeless just fuels the powerlessness and actually augments fuels the injustice happening more frequently. So at some level, if you're seeing injustice, we all want to get to a point where we can, even if it's tiny, quiet, micro resistance, to injustice, those are really powerful. And those are powerful. Maybe we're not going to change our society right away, right? But we are going to benefit our own mental health by taking action, some form of even small action. I'm not saying go start marching in the streets and put your life at risk, which nowadays that's the risk I think goes with being part of some of these protests we see around the world. But for your own psychological health, there needs to be small acts of resistance in some ways, right? So, and this always, I remember when I was in graduate school reading my first theory textbook by Gerald Corey. I think, and I don't know if any of you picked up on this in his cognitive behavioral therapy chapter, going over Ellis. Ellis listed life should be fair as an irrational belief. I'm telling you, that's put me into an existential crisis for a month because I'm like, yeah, life should be fair, right? Life is supposed to be fair. What do you mean it's not? That's irrational to believe that? And I think what Alice was getting at is kind of what I described. There's the ideal that life is fair, but the truth is it's far from that. And there's a gap there. And it doesn't mean, I think for our own psychological well-being, healthy people are always trying to close that gap for themselves and everyone else in society. So there's a movement towards narrowing that gap. But I think what Ellis was saying here and what totally blew me out of the water when I first entered the field is that if you expect life to be fair and you're going to throw a hissy fit when it doesn't, and you're going to make yourself anxious and depressed because life isn't fair, you're the one who's acting irrational, Diane. So I've been working on this. I think the Buddhists got me further than Ellis did, but there is a lot in the mental health world that talks about this. So when we look at distress over the political realities, and this is the topic and slide, I had friends say, "Don't do this," but I think I have gotten helped a lot of my clients who are highly distressed over political realities right now using the decision door method because, if once you come to grips with what is the reality, right? One option is to become politically active, be part of the solution. It creates a sense of agency. So if you start becoming politically active, showing up at protests, running for office, hello, right? There's a huge personal toll, right? There's a lot of stress. It's a difficult system to navigate. And there are real serious potential risks nowadays, being arrested yourself, targeted for legal action, right? Losing family and friends. I think a lot of good politicians aren't going into politics anymore because of the personal risks are too high. And they're like, I will not take that door. But nonetheless, it's a door that is available, right? There's another is moving to another state or country. And I've had a lot of my friends do this actually, or a surprising number, maybe a lot's not strong, but I've 3 or 4 friends, close friends who've done this. And right, so they're doing this because they can get into a country or a state that's was run more the way they want to. But then they have the challenge of the financials of moving, the learning a new language. All of that is a huge, huge shift, leaving friends and family behind and you may or may not be happier, right? Another is focusing on improving a local community somehow, right? So still having a sense of agency, but maybe going into your school or your church or whatever community that you are a part of to make a difference. And so you may not be fixing it at the highest level, but maybe at a local level, you can make a small difference somewhere, right? When the fires happened in Palisades, really freaked, that was horrifying, right? And so um, and so one of the things I did to cope was to offer a free training to all, first responders about how to handle, therapy in the ashes is what it was called. That psychologically did a lot of good for me. I did some good for my community. I made a difference, right? So realizing that we can, find ways, but it's important, when you are facing injustice or just political polarization and realities like that, how can you try to make a difference? Which door can you take and use free will choice to make things a bit better? So we're going to wrap up here and I'm going to try to take some questions, but just, knowing that I hope one of the pieces you leave with from this training is that there really is a new focus of treatment is helping people weather just the uncertainty, developing a sense of equanimity, a sense of free will choice, and taking responsibility for those choices. And that's really what the decision door method helps people with. So just a reminder that you're going to get your continuing educations in the course, and we'll be sending out the instructions for that via email. And as we wrap up, I just wanted to share some other thoughts around just, your path forward as a mental health professional. And one of the things I want to say is that I really believe effective therapy should be should be easy. And things like the decision door method, you're going to find they really do make a huge difference. Because the truth is, we know what works in the 21st century in this field. And what the part of that is, we really know it's our way of being. So I've given you an intervention, but who you are and how you deliver it is really going to be key. And we also know that there's a top 15% of clinicians where their theoretical method doesn't matter because how they relate to people is truly the key to getting positive results in mental health. And that's something, I really have come to believe that becoming highly effective is a teachable skill. And this decision door method, I think, is a little taste of what that can be like. And so that's why I have this Therapy That Works Unifying Framework course, because if you're really interested in learning how to do this work simply and well, I just want to invite you to check this out. It is a 5-month masterclass, so it is something where you really learn all the skills you need to be a better clinician. It takes 50 theories and integrates it into one. And you can use this one approach with all your clients, individuals, couples, family, children. It works with everyone because it's a simple framework for doing that's based on everything we know in the field. And it comes with a lot of live clinical demonstrations and client simulations like the one that we're going to have right after this, because this is the only way to learn real skills. And what I've discovered is when I went through all this training 30 years ago, I sat with the masters and I worked with them and I watched them and we worked together with clients and I learned what good therapy feels like, what it looks like it's in my bones. I know what it looks and feels like. And that has really gotten lost in contemporary education in mental health. And so it's a really powerful way to learn. If you want a taste of it, like I said, there is a simulation after this. And the other piece is that there's a self of the clinician piece that is missing, I think, from most training. That's really a comprehensive, how do you live and do this work year in, year out? As a human being doing this difficult work. And the research is clear, it is a more difficult time. We are seeing tougher clients with bigger problems, and we have heavier caseloads all the way around. And how this course is different in a nutshell really is you learn clinical skills in a way that most contemporary continuing education does not teach you. I have students saying in the first 30 days, their clients are commenting on how different it feels. And it really demystifies how to do great therapy. And you really become better at every other approach that you already know. The other piece, and a lot of folks will say this is their favorite part of the course, is personal effectiveness. This is learning how to set goals in your own personal life and achieve them. It makes you a better clinician, and it makes your life personally much more fulfilling and rewarding. I think most of us get into this work because we also want to have better answers for how to live life well. And this course teaches you a process to stay on that development that works for people. And finally, a lot of people will just say that this is a supporting, uplifting community. This can be very lonely work, even when you work in a big agency with 100 people, right? Oftentimes because there's an employee or employee circumstance or an intern circumstance or situation, you don't have this kind of full level of personalized support because there's a business relationship there. So people have said that they feel free to just be themselves, to ask questions they would never ask, in a workplace, because they have that. And it really, this is a community of people who want to get really good at doing this work. They're dedicated. And so I think it's a real special community to be a part of. And just so clients, the graduates say that they do feel more confident, and this is 100%. I didn't make these numbers up. It's kind of bizarre, but these are real. Their clinical skills improve usually within the first month. They've grown personally, and that it is totally worth their investment. And what people say over and over again, like Shelley's saying, this is an answer to a prayer. I finally, someone's teaching me how to do therapy in very simple, straightforward language. Coolest thing I've done in a long time. It really is therapy that works. I mean, that's people are like, this really works. I'm like, that's how we came up with therapy that works. It works. And it really, most people will say it really exceeds their expectations. Especially everyone loves the simulations. I put in everything you need to be successful personally, professionally. I go into passive income because I think making a living in this field is hard and we need to have every trick in the book to do that. There is a membership where you get case consultation for 6 months or more with me. That comes part of the program on top of the other live courses. There's a 2-minute treatment plan course. It's everyone's favorite. Imposter syndrome. A lot of people like that. And you get all your law and ethics that you need. So if you're interested, you're invited to join us if it's right for you. I do have a special. This is like nearly the early bird price because I know financial times are tough. So for as little as 160, 46 a month, you can join this 5-month course, or you can do a one-time payment. You can use your QR code there to check it out. But I just invite you to join me if it sounds like a good fit for you. We are starting. It is always an amazing adventure. I'm going to go ahead and start with the Q&A. And so if you look in your toolbar, you can see Q&A section. I'll start in the Q&A and then I will work through the chat questions. Okay, if you're doing this for PD, will an attendance certificate be available at the end? I don't know what a PD is, Madeline, but you will get a CE certificate, which is definitely would cover, what do you call again, attendance certificate for a PD. As program director in academic speak, that's what PD means to me. Do you have a spreadsheet I use with the clients that I can share? Eileen, I don't because it depends on the client. I usually ask them to, if they needed to, if I were on Zoom, I would create it with them because I'm pretty good at spreadsheets. But it just depends what decision they're making, right? So there's a job decision, that sort of thing. And just so you know, I'm so into spreadsheets. When you join the Therapy That Works course, you get a spreadsheet for your personal life, for your business life, for retirement, for all these things. And people have said that I get some of the most positive feedback on the spreadsheet from that course because it helps them make better decisions. So spreadsheet therapy, it really does improve the decisions that you make. I have had people go like, oh, I didn't realize how compound interest works. So definitely, but I would create it with them on Zoom is typically because it's hard to have a default one. It depends on the decision. Oh, you know what, Rhonda? I will upload the contraindication slide. I added it, is what I added. So I will upload it at the end of this and I'll put it up there. So you have a pretty version of it because it was a question that came up. So I thought I would do that. Okay, so Megan's asking, where does the 4-level assessment come in for the decision door method? So the 4-level assessment comes in when I'm thinking of what are the benefits, what are the problems, what are the risks. I think about it on all 4 levels. So behaviorally, what are they going to have to do if they go through this door? What are the behavioral consequences? What are the emotional consequences? What are they likely to feel, right? Is it going to strengthen attachments to other, make them feel more emotionally safe? Is it going to be frustrating? So I'm going to look at all of that cognitively, what kind of thoughts and beliefs and identity narratives are likely to come with each decision, right? So the identity narrative around if I stay in my marriage, what are my kids, how as people talk about this, what will my kids say about me versus if I leave, what my kids will say about me. And they're totally different ones each time. Societal level, what are the implications about around social location? How will I feel about myself, in terms of gender, age, race, LGBTQ identity? What's the cultural feedback I will get, right? What will my religious community say about this decision? So I use the 4 levels assessment, Megan, to help think about the implications on multiple levels, not just the most obvious ones, right? So like with divorce, you have family, there's usually cultural values or religious values and how you would fit into that. Hope that makes sense. Okay. Terry's asking, is the following decision doors simulation the same as the one we did in the other course, Therapy That Works or Laughter Way to Licensure? No, it's a totally different one. I actually created 3 new simulations. Last Sunday we did one on a divorce decision. Last Friday we did one on a career, and today we're going to do about a woman second guessing whether or not to get married. So they're all totally new characters. They've never been done before. These are all new people. So it's all totally different in terms of the simulation. So it's really been a lot of fun. So the PDF, I have the PDF slides is what I have for this. So for today, we're going to claim you get to claim an hour and a half for this morning session. If you attend the afternoon or what's going to start in half an hour, that's a 2 hour simulation. So you get 2 hours for that. So that's the difference. Yeah. So the slides you're going to find in the course when you log in to get your continuing education. Yep. Ah, okay. So Rennie, PD is professional development hours for graduate students. So yeah, you can just get the CE certificate. It will count for your professional development for sure. Sorry, PD is program director in my little world. Ha! Awesome. Rhonda's saying, I will be using this right away with my husband for a decision we're making together. I love it. No, people, this is the first time I've done an intervention where people, I have like all these success stories coming in of how helpful it is. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Oh, thank you, Maggie, saying she did the unifying framework level one. It was fantastic, super beneficial. I wish I could, I've been told I need to market it better, and just in the sense of it really is everything you need to know to be a great clinician in a single package. And it's simplified. So I invite you to check it out. I really think it will make your life worth it. I mean, it really make your life easier. I really try to get way more than your money for in that course because I see so many people struggling to do this work well, largely because our field has unintentionally made it super complex to learn how to do it. And so this is my way of trying to improve the mental health situation, the training for mental health professionals, but also improve the quality of treatment that clients are getting because we do have what do you call it again? I think much greater challenges. Any tips for new graduate students who haven't seen clients yet? Any tips? I, don't- you know, I think, use this method in your own life. I do invite new students who haven't seen clients to start out in my Therapy That Works program. It really makes learning to do this work much, much easier. And what I've seen is people who start early in the program even before they start seeing clients, they are able to achieve, and often they'll go to my level two course. When they do that, they really, I mean, become exceptional clinicians. And what would normally take 10 years or more, they can become that good in 2 or 3 years. It's really transformational. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Let's see. I got to see some more Q&A questions here. Okay, in a situation like moving where the client is looking to either stay or leave, I'm just curious how you explore all the doors the client may have since you stated it must be three. I mean, sometimes it's two or three, but you can have variations. I mean, you can have sometimes in a session, I just have two doors, but the clients will leave going, I was thinking about those doors all week long. It's the only months later, people will be like, those doors were back. Thinking about the doors, I'm back at the doors, right? But they're consciously thinking through their choices. So, but you can always find a third, fourth, or fifth door, even if they're moving, right? One is to, move immediately. One is to stay and never move. One is to move immediately. One is to move in a year from now, right? So I had to do a bunch of decision doors with my moving to Hawaii, and they shifted, right? When I didn't get the job I was expecting, and situations changed with my kids, um, and my actually the real breaker was that my kids didn't get into the school they wanted to go to. I couldn't get them in, and I didn't apply to enough places to get them into a place that would be a good fit. They're both into STEM and music, and so I couldn't get them into a good fit school. So ultimately, that was where that people are like, why did you move to Hawaii? I'm like, that part of the door didn't line up, and I wasn't willing to take the risk of moving my kids to a new place and having them be miserable in school at the same time. So you can always find different doors. What happens if I move in this way? What if I move that way, right? So you can always find more doors. That's our job, is to help them find the doors, because finding if you can get up to three doors and start finding these more subtle options, that's why they keep thinking about the doors all week because there's so many possibilities. Um, okay. Yeah, so yeah, for the PD's professional development hours at her university, and yes, the CE certificate will definitely cover that. Oh, the link for the simulation occurring right after this, if you want that link, I think we can get that in the chat. Anna just put that in the chat if you see that. Terry, so that is the link. So yeah, so you can go ahead and put that in the chat. If you still want to join the simulation, and that will be with a different URL. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so this person's saying they're in retirement age, earned the MFT 12 years ago, and back then, due to a grueling work schedule, never finished their hours. Awesome. I'm over 68 and now I'm worrying if it's too late to be a good therapist. Absolutely not. Um, so I have people both in my Laugh Your Way to Licensure class for MFT licensure who are well into their 60s. Some of them have been out of school for 20 plus years and they passed their exam. And I certainly have a lot of people sign up for my Therapy That Works Unifying Framework who say, this is a second career. I'm in my 50s or 60s. I don't have 10 years to get good. Teach me how to do it. So I do really encourage you to check out the either one of those courses. I have a lot of people with lots of life experience. As Eileen is saying, life experience does help you be great. Um, so I invite you to check out both of those options and see if they're a fit for you. So Letitia's asking, when does Therapy That Works start and will there be live sessions? So there are, yes, it is starting in the next couple of weeks here. But there are live sessions all through September, all the way through January. And we create a schedule that works. So one of the first things you do when you sign up is you let me know what times work. And we will have multiple options for most of the sessions. You'll have two different time zones to choose from because we do have folks from all over the world in the course. It's really an amazing experience just to talk with people doing therapy and how it works in different parts of the world. So I invite you to check that out, but they are starting, they're all recorded. So some people watch them all via recording. Some people like to attend all of them live. The average person attends about half of them live, but they're 9 live sessions, and usually there's multiple options. So, but there are 9 basic session types that you can join, and 5 of them are simulations. And you'll also get to watch me do 2 different live sessions, which is people like to do that too. So that's a lot of fun. Okay, awesome. Let's see, I got a couple new questions coming in here. So the CE link for the CEs, you just need to go to therapythatworksinstitute.com/login. So go to my homepage or the homepage for my institute and you will find it. You log in, you go into your library and you'll see the decision doors will pop up. Okay. So everyone's cheering. Grad student at 63. Love it, Deanna. And Katrina started at 46. Absolutely. It's a great career path. And, I will be doing this for many, many years. And that's what's beautiful, I think, about this work is that we can do this for a long time. And it's such joyful work, I think. It really it's an incredible field to be a part of. And so if you're not loving what you do, if you're feeling overwhelmed with your clients, I mean, that is what this unifying framework is about, is it should feel easy because we know what works and it's learning how to do it. And I think what's happened is graduate training and postgraduate training has turned in. We just cram your head full of lots of different theories that explain why people do what they do. And we give you these manualized treatments, but there's not enough of the subtlety of how to do it. So great. Awesome, awesome. So I'm going to just see if there are other questions I have missed periodically. Um, so let's see. Okay. Make sure if you don't forget, if you want to register for Therapy That Works, oh, it's not 0% off, it's 20% off. Um, but definitely do try to get use that coupon code. You will save quite a bit of money. If you want to join and do that by the end of tonight. Thank you, Krista. I guess I'm glad the message came through around political uncertainty and how this method helps. It does. And it's not saying that there are horrifying circumstances around the globe that are a gut punch. Like I have to, I have to take a deep breath and meditate before I read the news because it's really, it's like one tidal wave after another. And we need to feel it, we need to recognize it, we need to name it, but we don't want to get paralyzed by what we're seeing and um, finding a sense of agency and finding a sense of purpose and taking some kind of action. That's where you cling on to your sanity. But if you kind of just sink into doom, gloom, and hopelessness, then or we allow our clients to go there without taking any shape or form of agency, it just makes this problem worse and not better, for sure. Okay, awesome. Okay, got some new message coming in. Yes, and if you're having any issues with things, just email friendlyhelp@dianegayhart.com. Okay, so very good. So just so you know, you need to kind of log into the course. The CEs don't, the quiz doesn't get sent to you. Okay. Oh, someone's asking, I was unsure about the difference between known problems and potential risks. I make a slight distinction there, may not be super helpful for all clients and cases, but known problems are like, if, for example, I want to send my kids to a school that costs me money to send them to, then I'm going to have to work more hours or cut my budget somewhere. Like the known problem is something's got to give. I'm going to have to work more or I'm going to spend less someplace else. So those are the known problems when you choose to spend money, pretty much. And what are the risks, right? The risks are you may or may not be happy. It may or may not make a difference. It may your kid may or may not succeed at this other school. So the risks, the known problems are like you need to gear up to accept these problems as part of your life. The potential risks are problems that might happen. So, and it's some cases, I think when we were talking about, sometimes it's a bigger, a more important distinction than others. Well, thank you, Megan, for answering that question for me. I love it. Oh yeah, I'm glad Baxter liked my Sony headphone story. Well, what's so funny that kid now, he does not want to spend a dime on anything except for musical instruments. He's a musician, he plays saxophones, they're very expensive. So he knows where to get used saxophones. So it's one of my best parenting interventions because he is so frugal. And we have interesting conversations. Like he's like, Mom, vacations are way too expensive. Why do we go on them? And I'm like, because your mom needs to de-stress because she works three jobs. And so, and that's my decision door, like I have decided that's part of my, one of the things I budget for. There's a lot I don't. My kids don't get ice cream, as you hear. They don't get a lot of ice cream. We don't eat out a lot. We don't get a lot of entertainment or movies. That's places where I spend a lot less money than the average family on entertainment and eating out. I do spend money on that. And my son gets used instruments, not new instruments. But he, at a young age, he's realizing that that's how budgets work. Okay. Awesome, awesome. Let's see, I got a few more questions coming in, and then I'm going to hop into the next one. Okay, do you identify which theories are in play for each part of the unifying framework? In my internship, we have to note which evidence-based approach we use for each session when we write our SOAP notes. Katrina, I do. So yeah, we talk a lot about that. I have a whole chart. There's actually 8 levels, not just four, but this is just introductory discussion of it. So we look at there are actually each of the 4 levels has two dimensions, and we layer the different theories, including the evidence-based treatments across each of those. But yeah, so we definitely talk about the different theories. But what the unifying framework does, it takes away the jargon. So you can a lot of what you're doing in those evidence-based treatments, it all overlays with traditional approaches. And so you learn to get really good at languaging things in different ways. So for your progress notes, you just need to know the vocabulary for the EBTs that your agency is paid to do. But you can use this one unifying framework to see how they're all, dealing with the same basic dynamics. So the truth is, we're all, regardless of which of the 50 or 500 different theories you're using, we're all dealing with the same human experience. We've just called it 1,000 different things that gets everyone confused. And what the unifying framework allows you to do is to see how whatever theory you have to use at your site overlays with everything you learned in grad school. And so it doesn't feel so like 1,000 miles apart difference. You begin to see that, oh, we're all talking about the different things. So even if, like, for example, CBT works on behavior and cognitive, and emotional works and the humanistic approaches work on the emotional level. But they're all looking at the same exact symptom cycle, symptom dynamics, symptom realities. They're just noticing different parts, of the dynamic and languaging in very different ways. But once you learn to see that it's all part of the exact same thing happening, it's so much less stressful to work on. So that is why. that's how you would use it, Katrina, with those sorts of notes. So your employer could tell you, you need to write, a functional family therapy note or a dialectic behavior therapy note or an emotionally focused family therapy note. And you're like, okay, I got it. But you're still in the room, you're doing the exact same thing. And that's where the stress relief comes in because you have a framework that works for everything, and then whatever you want to call, whatever language you want to use on top of it layers because it's unifying. And it's really removing the jargon, getting down to simplicity. And so I think all of us at a gut level, you go to all these different trainings, you're like, oh, I think I heard that one before. And oh, yeah, that sounds a lot like this, doesn't it? Like people are like, this sounds like DBT. I'm like, yep, it does. That's okay. It's that's the Buddhist piece. And so you can call it DBT, you can call it Buddhism, you can call it acceptance and commitment therapy. They all have, they all kind of are describing that same radical acceptance of reality. So this is where the unifying framework really makes doing this work easy and doable and less stressful. And so that's why I have the 100% of people say things got more confident and they feel like they're doing better work. It's because there really is a way to do this in a much more simplified way than we'll all been taught. Okay. Awesome, awesome. Oh yes, yes, we do use the decision doors with kids. I think you can go down as low as 5 years old. Awesome, Leon. Great. You're going to use it to make relocating decision. Very, very cool. I love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah, there is a ton of overlap, Katrina. And so I know with evidence-based treatments, they get into super specific language and you just learn to play the game, right? You learn to use their vocabulary. But once you see the framework underneath that really underpins everything, you become much more effective. Because the truth is, sometimes you do need an emotionally focused intervention. Sometimes it needs to be cognitive. Sometimes it needs to be behavioral. Sometimes it needs to be at the societal level. And this way you can do whatever is called for, whatever is going to work with the client who's sitting in front of you, but you're using the same framework for everything. And let me tell you, that is certainly a lot less stressful. So with this, I think everyone looks like people are happy and good. We'll be sending you an email with the links to get your CE. And for that, again, you just go to therapythatworksinstitute.com/login or look in your email and you should have a place to click to log into the course and then just navigate to the Get My CEs here. And I will post a new set of handouts up shortly. Okay, everyone, and if you're joining me for simulation, I can't wait to see you. We will meet in 12 minutes in the simulation room. Okay? Be well and take care. I'm glad you enjoyed this so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.